going live. You're live.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, we're a little late. We're talking about blackout, so appropriately we had our own blackout on video here. My name is Judy Lin. The economy reporter at CalMatters, and I am sitting here with the legendary Dan Morain, our senior editor and editor of What Matters newsletter. And on the line with us is Julie Cart, our fabulous environmental reporter who knows all things wildfires. And so together, we're here for a discussion on this year's wildfire season, the blackouts, what's going on with the utilities, and we hope to have this be interactive. So we welcome your questions. To provide some context, the recent outages impacted an estimated 2 million people. That's a lot of inconvenience and frustration. At the same time, down in Southern California, we have the Saddle Ridge fire, and we're hearing that it may have been likely caused by electrical equipment. So there's this convergence right now of a wildfire season, a PG&E bankruptcy, and a lot of policy questions of how are we going to deal with this, and is this the new normal? I want to kick it off with some questions for Julie. If we're looking at another season, what is it can you provide some context of why is it that there's more wildfires?
Okay, for the next hour, I'll be answering this question. I think everybody who lives here knows the wider context. Climate change is driving a lot of it. Some of it has to do with 147 million dead trees. It has to do with a prolonged drought. Some scientists argue it has to do with the care and maintenance of the national forests, of which the federal government owns the vast majority of the forest land in the state. I think the heart of the question might be the number of Californians who live in high and severe risk areas, which is something on the order of 640,000 homes. That adds to the urgency to fight the fires. We don't always fight every single fire with everything we've got, giant planes and helicopters. So I think the problem is that there are so many Californians living in harm's way, and it adds to the urgency and the necessity of dealing with these fires.
Thank you. And so let's talk a little bit about the recent blackouts. PG&E shut down power for 800,000 customers, and at the same time down in San Diego, you see a more targeted shutdown blackout. And I'm wondering what's going on between these utilities, and why are we seeing such different response?
San Diego Gas and Electric has had a pretty robust response to wildfire, both for detection and upgrading its lines since about 2007. So they're acknowledged by state agencies like the Public Utilities Commission as the leader in this. They've spent a ton of money, keeping in mind they're the smallest of the investor-owned utilities. They have the smallest service area. So I guess it's billions of dollars, but it's slightly easier for them to do. For example, they have a very extensive network of weather stations and cameras, so they can understand in real time what's happening, both for fire and also how their equipment is operating. They also have a lot of really interesting technological devices that they can put on the lines that tell them also in real time the health of their equipment, if it's going to fail or if it's aging. So the PUC has asked all the utilities more or less to follow the example of the good student in class and also share a lot of information. So this might change. So you might see other utilities adopt what San Diego Gas and Electric has been doing, and starting with their long history of these power shutoffs.
I want to talk a little bit now about how we cope. I'm wondering first off if we can take a step back. Dan, what's the history lesson here that we need to start with? The blackouts are not new for California, sadly. You know, what happened during the Gray Davis era?
Well, what happened was it's a different situation, but there are similarities. One of the big differences is that California had just started in the world of energy deregulation, which was a grand concept that started in the 1990s. The legislature approved a bill that sort of deregulated electricity in California. And really, what it did was open the system up for gaming and manipulation by energy traders such as Enron, who people may recall. People went off to prison for what happened at Enron. But it wasn't just Enron. It was a bunch of energy buccaneers and marketers, and they manipulated the power grid. In California, costs went way up for PG&E and for Edison and for San Diego Gas and Electric. PG&E went bankrupt back then as a result of this. Edison teetered but didn't go bankrupt, and neither did San Diego Gas and Electric. But there were a few blackouts. There were about a half a dozen rolling blackouts around the state, and that infuriated voters. And that was something that Governor Gray Davis never recovered from. He won re-election in 2002, but in a very weakened state, and then was recalled in 2003. So there are real political perils here. Today's blackouts are caused by very different reasons. It's not energy manipulation so much as it is changes in the environment, changes, and also no doubt PG&E's inability to sort of keep up with the dying trees and its equipment and a variety of similar reasons.
And so, is there something that Governor Newsom should be watching for? As a student of politics.
He should be watching polls. He's got a fair number of people who were here during the Davis administration or who are in his administration. So he's well aware of it. He was here. He was in San Francisco at the time. So he well remembers this. And he's been dealing with PG&E his entire career. He's a PG&E customer. He was in San Francisco and Marin, and now out in east of Sacramento where he lives now. So he's well aware of PG&E and its complexity. It's a huge utility. It covers from Kern County to the Oregon border. It's huge and very complex from the densest parts of the state in San Francisco to the most rural parts of the state. So it's got a very complex system.
So I guess, more immediate, he's calling for rebates, $100 for residential customers, $250 for small business owners.
A nice gesture, isn't it? I think if you were a restaurant or a grocery store who lost power for 3 days, you lost a lot more than $250.
I should also point out that PG&E, just through regulatory filings, are asking for rate increases that could add up to $360 a year for the average customer. So do the math, and it doesn't cover the loss.
Yeah, no, this is a very fraught, perilous political time for any politician. There's no downside in beating up on PG&E right now. It's a business that people long have loved to hate. I grew up with PG&E too, but now there's even more reason to. They caused the Camp Fire for crying out loud. 285 people died. It's a terrible thing. So it's hard to work up much sympathy for PG&E. PG&E is not helping itself in a variety of ways. Their website crashed on the night they shut the power. Their call lines were jammed. Nobody could get through. They've done a very bad job of communicating on top of everything else.
So, what are the options here for the state, both in terms of utilities, cost recovery, and what to do about managing these monopolies in essence? Is it are we looking at another bailout or breaking up PG&E? Can we somehow make PG&E a public utility? Julie, can you walk through some of the options that are being kicked around, even if it's in theory?
I'll skip you through them. It's not my specialty. Yes, they could break it up. It is as Dan said, it is just a very sophisticated both gas and electric utility, and a lot of utilities have divested of those kinds of specificity thing. So it could be bought by different ones. There is a big movement in California toward community choice aggregation. So smaller local utilities, and this is something that a lot of people have pointed to during this kind of power shutoff. You'd have the ability to shut close power to smaller and smaller, more discrete areas, which would, of course, lessen the impact. And if you had smaller, more flexible utilities, let's say, that might help. To me, this is just charging toward the courtroom, and it's not something I have the capacity to really unspool for anybody.
Well,
we're in they're in bankruptcy court, and so much of this is going to be sorted out by Judge Montali over in San Francisco bankruptcy court. There's one group that currently holds control of PG&E, and there's another group of investors which own a bunch of bonds, and it wants to get control. Governor Newsom's talking about a third group. He's vague on this point, but he is very interested. Sacramento is very interested in the ownership of PG&E. Part of it may be municipalization of some of it, but the question is, what happens to the poor or rural parts of the state? Who takes care of them? The reality is that there are a lot of people who live up in far northern California and eastern in the Sierra, and those communities are not nearly as wealthy as Marin or San Mateo or San Francisco. And so, how are they going to deliver power if the more wealthy parts of the system break off and form their own municipal power authorities?
Well, so let's take some questions that we're getting from folks in the audience. This one, I think, Julie, you can answer this one. When we talk about logging, is there an option such as letting logging companies clear the power lines and then letting them keep the wood as a result, as kind of a trade, a barter system?
That's already happening. The utilities are responsible now for clearing their utility corridors, which sometimes are a mile wide. They're not always cutting the trees down. Sometimes it's trimming, and it's not always trees. It's all kinds of vegetation that's flammable in the state. Regarding cutting, trimming, that kind of thing in forest land, scientifically, the most effective way to deal with troublesome trees is to burn them. And it's a very difficult thing. These are called prescribed fires. The other way is called mechanical trimming. Anyway, thinning through prescribed burns is very effective. It's natural, but a little controversial. The fires get out of control sometimes. The wind changes and a community suddenly is enveloped in smoke and everyone complains. So it's very difficult, and you can only do those at certain times of year. Some of those prescribed burns take 2 years to plan. So to the question, utilities are already trimming their trees. The problem for the logging aspect, the commercial aspect, is they're small diameter trees. They don't have a huge commercial value. They're right now in California, there's stacks and stacks and stacks of trees sitting around in these what are called slash piles. They're very dangerous. Nobody knows where to take them. There's not really a very robust forestry or milling industry in the state. It's shut down over years, so it's a problem. So cutting trees is part of the response, but it's not the only solution.
Okay. Well, in terms of wildfire safety in these rural areas, another audience member asked, this points out that the CPUC approved a $100 million budget for energy storage units that low-income and disadvantaged communities can apply for during power safety public power shutoffs. What's your take on this strategy, and what are the options for more sane power shutoffs in the future?
Good Lord. For individuals, in terms of trying to back up their power, there are a number of options. A lot of them involve solar. Solar battery storage is growing more and more sophisticated and more accessible. Again, not a panacea. That it might, the most robust system might run a house for 4 or 5 hours. So it's not something that if you have weeks and weeks or days and days even, it's going to bail you out. The state has stepped in. There's some new bills that have been signed by the governor. One that helps folks who are disadvantaged or who have health issues who require electricity for a medical equipment, and the state is helping to distribute funds to help those people. Another way to handle it is for there to be in communities a center where people can go to, just like when there's high heat or there's earthquakes, an emergency shelter, and the shelter has electricity, so it can provide that to people who need that. So again, a very complex problem, and there's probably not one way to get at it.
One of the issues, of course, is diesel generators pick off a lot of pollutants, and so if we become increasingly reliant on individual generators or even fuel cells, more sophisticated fuel cells, they all run on fossil fuel, and so they're picking off greenhouse gases, so that makes it complicated from an air resources standpoint.
There was one more question from the audience. I think this is a lot of anger toward PG&E. They ask if there's a way to claw back some of the PG&E executive bonuses for the blackout, and I'm thinking the money is out.
Yeah, no, they've got the money now. Yeah, they're going to have it. It will be complicated for PG&E before the California Public Utilities Commission. The new president of the Public Utilities Commission, very, very hard-nosed, very skilled government official, public servant, Mary Bell Thatcher. She's been around for more than 40 years in California, and Washington, and Nevada. She knows a lot. She's going to be very strict, I think, in her assessment of PG&E. Not that the last president, Michael Picker, wasn't, but I think Mary Bell Thatcher is going to bring a new sort of energy and a new set of eyes to this.
On Friday, she's already calling PG&E to the commission, and there's supposed to be. I'm expecting some fireworks when that happens.
Well, they've got some explaining to do.
Let's see. Are there any other subjects or topics that we should touch on? We've got about a minute left to wrap up.
I'm waiting for someone on the state level to stand up and start looking at what is really a zoning issue. We don't allow people sometimes to live in floodplains, or it's so ridiculously expensive to try to find insurance, which folks in wildfire areas are finding. At some point, this is what experts are saying, we have to stop building and living in those areas, and that's a local control, a local zoning decision. It's very, very difficult to say no to developers and to homeowners who want to live somewhere. And in other countries, there are discussions about who bears the burden for this, who is paying for the cleanup costs, and it's a discussion we're not really having in California. CalMatters, we just did a story last week about the campfire just to clean up in Paradise, which was quite extensive, could cost more than $1.5 billion, and we're all paying for that, and it needs to be done, and these people are victims. But at the same time, there are some enormous costs that are being borne by everyone, and it's just a discussion that's not really being had.
There is one last question coming in about whether switching to solar is the best solution. I think there's solar, but then the solar is tied to the grid, so it's about storage, right?
Yeah, it's not going to help you if you without a battery, and I'm not sure the battery technology is there to pull you through a blackout for a long period of time. So solar may save you money on as rates raise, but it's not as if it's going to shield you from a blackout.
Well, we would hope to continue this conversation with you all out in this community as we all bear through this new wildfire season and our new normal. We thank you for joining us. We recommend you subscribe to What Matters. Check out CalMatters at calmatters.org and stay in touch with us as we continue our coverage. Thank you so much.